These are the days.
It's me. Alright, welcome everybody.
Woo!
We're trying to test your ears right now.
Speck&Tech number 30. Actually, the
30?
Actually, the first one in 2019.
Aspetta che secondo me... I could speak and take the embarrassment out of Francesco, but it's very fun, so let's keep this moment and put me in.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Thank you,
Go
Francesco.
with it, yeah. Okay, people. Oh, there are 4 seats here in the first row. People, come here. They still have. Come on. 4
Yeah,
chairs.
if anyone who is sitting or comfortable, there is a
It's
full
correct,
row here available. Usually
Yeah, also
Francesco don't mind.
yeah. You don't want to sit on a table for the rest of the night, so... Okay, so we were saying, Speck&Tech number 30. I don't know how many people are watching us online, but better to say hi. Hello from Trento. So, we were saying a couple of interesting things. First one, Speck&Tech number 30. Second one, first event of 2019. And the third one, we have our speaker here, John Graham.
Welcome.
Actually, coming from London this morning, take a flight tomorrow morning, enjoy some pizzas and some beers in Trento, so not bad, I could say.
He's living his dream.
Okay, we're going to be very quick this time because we want to leave the floor to him. Like, you don't have the City of Cloudflare every second day.
Really?
Yeah.
You're not playing?
Yeah.
Oh, well, anytime you want.
So, as always, our supporters.
Yeah, we are here in Impact Hub, which is this co-working space. If you want to come here, you need a desk or any other size of space. You just say that you come from... Probabilmente c'è una cassa che gracchia in ogni caso. Quella del fondo, secondo me se la spegne e basta.
Is this English?
Yeah, it's from Bristol. There is 10% off of Impact Hub if you say that you are from Speck&Tech.
And actually, how many people are here for the first time? Can you raise your hands, if you don't mind? Whoa, okay, that's quite a number, interesting. Try to be here next time as well, okay? Fuckers. Okay, then there's Julia's company, Belka.
Yeah, we do basically UX design and the front-end development on app and on web. And Francesco's one?
Yeah, my company as well, with all the people sitting here.
I really like it. I always say my company. Like,
sorry, I didn't found it, but gonna acquire some point.
Yeah, it's very dedicated.
But we are looking at a bunch of people as well, people with UX background, people with sales, people with machine learning, designers, developers especially. Fatura Cloud, who are the guys giving us their software for actually issuing you an invoice, an electronic invoice.
Also, we are trying to invite them, but they are in the nightmare of fatturazione elettronica. So as soon they get out from this very
Brexit time.
Yeah, bad time that they will come.
Yeah, if you want to try it out, just go there at the desk at the entrance. We live by your donations, so you can just go there and drop a coin. And then finally we have Diginate, so if you're looking at these cool stickers and you want to have quite some of them, you just go there at the desk and say, give me all your stickers, and we have quite a number of them, so pretty cool. We also have our tees, wearing it, but I also see a number of people wearing them. And we have some by females, but also males versions, so just go there and leave a donation and get a t-shirt, beautiful as you can imagine.
Like Francesco. You see, Francesco is beautiful.
Yeah.
Handsome guy.
Paul is the one providing us with the spec, because for the newcomers, when the event is gone, you can actually leave, and yeah, there's nothing after, okay?
Yeah, sorry, spec in the name is not real, so...
Yeah, no,
thanks for coming though. Yeah.
When the event finishes, there are beers and spec. The more we are, the less spec there is for everyone, but I think we will share it. And yeah, you can go on our website and basically see whatever we've done up to now. So over 30 events, you can see all the previous issues.
I'm really looking forward for the 33 event, like
Yeah.
33 Trentini, you know?
That's gonna be. And you find all the talks and the slides, the speakers. You also find some open position of the companies that are hiring in the area. And you can follow us on Facebook, on Telegram to stay updated. We have a bunch of things happening in the future as well, like not only events from Speck&Tech, but also from companies or from bodies here in the area that are cooperating with us. The question this time is, how can you donate?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. So first, take your wallet. You have to check that your wallet contains money. If you don't have money, you can't donate.
But you can leave the room.
Alright, now, if you have money, you can go on the back of the building where Luca, raise your hand, the beautiful guy in the pile back there, will ask you for some personal information. We are asking you for the personal information because we are stalkers, and like the Italian government, which mandatory asks us to get those kind of information, and you can give us a donation. Why you are donating? Well, it's easy, for making Speck&Tech keep existing and buying food and beers, inviting more awesome guests, and so on. Also, for as usual, the Francesco's Lamborghini.
Yeah.
It's the third.
Don't tell me the podcast.
Sorry, but it's so cool. You should check his Instagram.
Yeah. But one of the reasons that might drive me to give a donation is that at the desk there is actually a module. You can go there and you can fill it in, and you can get a JetBrains license yearly, like for the whole year. You can get Flixbus discounts up to 20%. Just get in, you will receive an email along the week by us with the coupon. And also you can win 2 tickets for PyConX, who's our media partner, so maybe we are their media partners, never understand that. But actually
they are our media partners, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. But anyway, you can get 2 tickets for PyConX, and we want to send some ambassadors to PyConX going there with a beautiful spec on their t-shirt. So try to get that as well if you're into Python and similar things.
Yeah, basically, if you're not donating, you're losing money because there is so much discount and stuff going on. Also, you can also buy a t-shirt if you really want something physical, but Flixbus and so on. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and then if you haven't seen yet, maybe we announced it last time actually, our event is already out, 26th February. I guess we said last time, so fuck it. The speaker is actually the current Debian project leader, Chris Lamb, coming again from London. So he's the first speaker, and then the second one is a surprise event, because it's not going to be here, it's not going to be a Speck&Tech.
It's not going to be even an event.
It's not going to be an event,
but it's going to be like a concept.
Yeah, it's going to be something that we're going to tell you in the upcoming weeks, but we have some nice plans, totally out of the box. Finally, before we give the word to our speaker, here is where you throw the questions. If you don't have any questions, you can get to this website anyway, because you can upvote the questions from others. If you go to slide.do/st30, or you go to slide.do and insert the code st30, if you are onto the Telegram app, you should have received a link already. You can put your questions up, vote others, and that's what our fantastic Valletta Michele over there will ask.
He's a boy.
Valletta, I think, is uncountable. It's only.
But he's one, but he's a boy. Vallettos, plural, Vallettos.
Michele. But those are the questions that our Michele will ask to the speaker later on, and feel free to upvote and downvote others. That's all from our side.
Yeah, just one last thing. Please do not ask for Michele's phone number on the Slido again. He's not giving his phone number. Stop it.
Yeah. And maybe final remark before wrapping up. As we said, there's going to be a talk, quite a different talk from what we have at Speck&Tech generally, because it's generally 2 talks. This time is only 1, but then we're going to have this panel with question and Q&A. So there's going to be a long time going along the night. Try to stay awake and keep tight, because there's going to be Speck and beers after that. So don't complain all the time, please. Thank you.
All right. So here we are. You already have your microphone, all right? So give a warm welcome to John. Thank you very much for coming.
Nada? Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me. This came about because somebody tweeted at me. I don't know who it was. Yeah, okay, and said, essentially, you know, it'd be great if you came to Italy and talked to us. And I think, to everyone's surprise, I said, yeah, okay. Okay. It's not very far from London, and you know, there are many people trying to escape Britain at the moment. So come here, and hopefully, if I have to, I'll go back in the morning. I've prepared a speech, actually a written speech, and I'm going to give everybody the text later on so they can read it. But I was on the train. I flew to Verona this afternoon, and I was on the train from Verona to Trento, and one of the guys in the London office, he pings me on GChat saying, "I'm still fixing your bugs," with this. So this is, it looks like January 26, 2015, I introduced a bug. And 4 years later, they're fixing it. And so one of the answers to the question, what does the CTO of Cloudflare do, is introduce bugs for others to fix later. So I actually replied to this saying, why did it take you 4 years to fix it? So I'm going to answer in more detail what the CTO of Cloudflare does. And I'm actually going to use this and actually read from it because I prepared a bunch of things. The team here asked me to speak for about an hour, which I can probably do. I have about 6,000 words printed out here, and can read them out to you, and I'll also give them to you afterwards. But I don't have a lot of slides. But thank you for inviting me. I mean, it was really quite a nice surprise to get invited to this part of Italy. I've been to Venice, I've been to Bologna, but this little corner here I've never been to, so I was like, that's a good excuse. And that's another thing, if you want to invite me to a talk, make it somewhere interesting. So if there's anybody who's, you know, in Bucharest, for example, I'll give you a list of places I haven't been. So, anyway, and now that I'm here, I mean, you all get to have the experience of seeing and hearing someone who you might have followed on Twitter, or read an article about, or read a blog post from. And it's a bit strange when you see the actual human being in front of you. It's always a bit of a surprise. So I may be older, younger, fatter, or thinner than you imagined. Don't tell me which one of those I am. I usually give talks with slides, but I decided I would go for no slides at all. I got this idea because Paul Graham from Y Combinator appears in this talk, and actually Paul gives talks without slides. And I thought, I'd try and copy Paul, so there we go. You know, lots of talks are filled with occasional photographs and memes and things, and actually, memes are okay, but the whole presentation is kind of boring, so I'm not going to do that, but maybe I will later. I appreciate that many of you, in fact, probably all of you, English is a second language. So I'm going to try to not speak too quickly. So if I start speaking really quickly like this, slow me down. And it may be a second or a third or a fourth language for many people. I know that I speak French as a second language, and I know that if people start speaking really fast in French, even though I'm pretty good at it, it suddenly goes, whoa, what do they say? So I'm going to also stick to something Winston Churchill said about English, which is, short words are the best, and old words, when short, are best of all. So I'm going to try to use short, old words, which you probably know. The other advantage of speaking like this is I have written a script, which you have in front of me, and I'll publish it afterwards, especially for those of you who had trouble understanding anything I said. You can read it and say, oh, that's what he said. All right, so I've worked at Cloudflare for 7 years. Who's used Cloudflare? Quite a lot. Who does not know what Cloudflare is? Okay, very few people. So Cloudflare is a San Francisco-based company that, this is what I tell immigration officers in the US. Because they always ask me, what do you do? And I've got this down to a thing that they can get, right? So Cloudflare protects websites from hackers and makes them faster. And one time, an immigration officer in the US said to me, so is that like Fastly? And I was like, how did you know one of our competitors? And in fact, he was very technical, it was a test. But so that's what we do. And we have about 13 million customers use this website, including, I believe, this website here. So I've been there 7 years. The company's 8 years old. When I joined it, it was 20 people. All of those people, except me, worked from an office in San Francisco. And actually, Francisco, can you give me the second slide once you've logged into your laptop? If you need to know his password, I can. So this is actually a picture from 2011. This is Matthew Prince. This is the CEO of Cloudflare. This is the spare bedroom in my house in London with a Cloudflare sticker on the door. And that is the really cheap desk that I bought for about £10. That is a rubbish chair, and that was his laptop. And that was our office. There are now 200 people in London at Cloudflare. And in a month we move into an office opposite Big Ben. Very big office. If you saw any of the fireworks, the New Year's Eve fireworks from London, that's our office where the fireworks were set off. So it's grown enormously, right? From 20 people to 900, close to 1,000 actually, probably at this point. We have offices in San Francisco, Austin, Champaign, New York, London, Munich, Singapore, and Beijing. London was just me at the beginning. We've very carefully managed our growth. We've raised a tremendous amount of money. I can't tell you the actual amount because we haven't told anybody else the actual amount, but it's a lot of money. It's a silly amount of money. But we've been very careful not to spend it. And one of the things that Cloudflare has done very carefully is grow very gradually. And the way that Cloudflare has done that is by having a single value which we look at every month, which is how much revenue did we make per employee? And that's it. And if we've got too many employees, that number goes down. If we make a lot of money, well, we can hire some more people. And that number has stayed almost flat for 7 years. And we completely control the growth like that. But anyway, let's go back to the beginning, because I can tell you some other things. How did I end up at Cloudflare? I ended up at Cloudflare because I gave a really good talk at a conference. That's the truth. Well, okay, it's a little more complex than that. But that's where it all started for me, without me knowing it, actually. 15 years ago, a guy called Paul Graham had started a conference at MIT about spam. He was known at the time for doing anti-spam. He wrote this thing called A Plan for Spam. And he was also a Lisp programmer. This is the year before he started Y Combinator. And I was invited to that conference because I was doing some spam things. And I had this open source machine learning spam filter. This is in 2002, called PopFile. And so I guess the second reason I ended up at Cloudflare is that I wrote some code and open sourced it. So I gave a good talk and I wrote some code and open sourced it. That program is called PopFile, and you can still download it today if you'd like your email sorted intelligently. If you use Gmail, you have essentially the same function where it can sort into different categories. But it was entirely arbitrary. It is still to this day, to my surprise, huge in Japan. I don't know why, but it is. I wrote PopFile because I had a problem, which is I had too much email. I was living in Silicon Valley and I was at a startup and I had just tons of mail all the time. And at the time I was using Microsoft Outlook, which is our corporate standard, and I wanted a way to sort my mail automatically. I wanted mailing lists to go over here, I wanted important personnel updates to go here, and I thought there has to be a way to do this. So I did some research and I found this idea of using Bayesian mathematics, which I had done a maths degree, and so I wrote the first version in Visual Basic of that program, and the second version in Perl. Now, so I got to Cloudflare because of a personal problem, open source, public speaking, and 2 languages that people look down on. Right? People look down on Visual Basic and Perl, so all of those are terrible languages. And I would just say, it's okay to, so a few people laughed when I mentioned those languages, and it's okay to laugh, but be wary about that. Because a good programmer who knows their language is way more important than the latest cool language. So we have some people in Cloudflare who absolutely know C++ in ways that I've never seen. We have some people who know Lua in ways that I've never seen. And their productivity is amazing in those languages. So okay, so that's how I kind of got there. So if there's a lesson in any of my experience of getting to Cloudflare in the first place, it's really sharing with other people, right? So I shared code through open source, through giving talks where I was talking about what I was doing and interacting with other people. And in general, I think the more that you end up giving, the more people appreciate you and the more opportunity you end up having. And actually, a few years ago, there's a book called Give and Take by a guy called Adam Grant, which is about this. It's about what personality types are most successful, particularly in companies. and really states that the employees who are helping others actually end up being more successful. And the ones who tend to be like the go-getting, hard-charging, keep all the things to themselves are actually less successful. And we actually gave everybody a copy of that book at Cloudflare. It's a standard thing. So there I was, anyway, at this conference at MIT organised by Paul Graham, and one of the people who saw me spoke was Matthew Prince, this guy. And he, at the time, was doing anti-spam stuff in Utah. This is before he went to Harvard and got an MBA. Matthew has a very unusual background. He has a degree in English, bachelor's degree in English, he has a law degree, he has a computer science degree, and he has an MBA from Harvard. So the real truth is this makes him a real pain to argue with. Because he can argue with you about a technical topic, a legal topic, how you're writing English. It's just a real nuisance. But it makes it very interesting and challenging to work with him. Anyway, he saw me, he spoke, he saw me speak, I saw him spoke, both of us thought, that seems like an interesting person, we should stay in contact. And over a period of years, I stayed in contact with Matthew. And when he, Michelle, and Lee, the three founders of Cloudflare, started it, he asked me to join. And it was honestly the wrong time for me. I had lived in the US, lived in France, worked in Germany, and just gone back to the UK. And he said, hey, can you come back to California? And to be honest with you, I thought Cloudflare was a stupid idea. I thought it was never going to work. I didn't tell him at the time, I've told him subsequently, but I didn't think anyone would sign up for the service because you had to give your DNS and your traffic. Like, who's going to do that? Well, it turns out thousands of people. So second lesson is I'm an idiot. Okay, so anyway, I'm glad I was wrong about it, and I'm glad that Matthew was persistent. I have all the emails. He's persistently like, hey, it's pretty cool, stuff's going well, why don't you join us? And you know, today there are 13 million domains registered on Cloudflare. And somehow I ended up as a CTO. Although I wasn't hired as the CTO, and it wasn't my ambition to be the CTO. I joined Cloudflare because I wanted to work with the people who were there. And I also wanted to do some cool stuff. And I thought that, you know, at a certain point it started to look like it was cool, and I liked the people. I mean, I'm very lucky that my background, you know, my upbringing and career enabled me to work with people I like and do cool stuff. And I think if you're in technology, you are already lucky, right? Because we're living through a boom. The cool stuff changes all the time, right? So if you ask me I finished my doctorate in 1992. So if you ask me what was cool in 1992, if I told you, you'd probably yawn, and you'd say, well, what is he talking about? But that's technology for you. When I was first at Cloudflare, so 7 years ago, I used to go to quite a lot of meetings with Matthew, particularly investor meetings. I had previously worked in venture capital. And you know, the investors, they come in, they're like, hey man, how's it going? You know, all this kind of stuff. And Matthew would say, terrible. He'd literally say, it's terrible. And you know, at first I thought, you know, he's just being an idiot. You know, he's just doing this to kind of have a laugh and see how people react. Which was in part true, right? He was partly doing it. But there's also some truth in that, because actually all small companies, startups, doesn't matter if it's technology or not, are in a way terrible. They are very, very difficult to get going. You know, why isn't everybody Mark Zuckerberg and making billions and billions of dollars? Because it's hard, right? And you have to kind of admit that it's hard. And it's very easy to get distracted by the sort of huge success of a small number of companies. So one thing is, you know, don't get distracted by Facebook, don't get distracted by Google. Think about the many small companies that are struggling and going through the difficulty of growing, because it is very hard. And unfortunately, hard work isn't enough, right? You know, there are lots of people who work hard. You know, nurses in hospitals work extremely hard, right? The hard work isn't the answer. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition. You know, you might not end up having enough money to make your thing work. You might not get the right people, or you might discover that your market is too small. Or you might just say, hey, this is a really cool idea, but only 3 people want it. And that happens. And Silicon Valley, if you're looking at Silicon Valley, lives in this schizophrenic state where everyone is like, it's amazing, we're killing it, right? They'll be really incredibly positive, and everyone seems like they're doing it so well. But inside, those same people are absolutely terrified and full of doubt, right? Because as an entrepreneur, you live in this weird state where you have to project this image. And in fact, you know, one of the things that happens is that that's mentally a very hard thing to do, to think 2 things at the same time like that, right? And you know, you see people having breakdowns and having mental health problems, and luckily it's being more acceptable to express how difficult it is. But we shouldn't be ashamed of admitting that it's hard, which is essentially what Matthew was doing when he was saying it was terrible, even if it was in a slightly joking way. It is hard. Silicon Valley also likes to use very positive language for things that might seem a bit negative or are tough. One of my favorites is a pivot, right? A pivot means you were going in the wrong direction and you changed to do something else. There's nothing wrong with it, but the word pivot kind of makes it sound like, yeah, well, that was the plan all along, was to do this cool thing, and blah, blah. Probably wasn't. You probably discovered that something, didn't work. If I've quoted Churchill, and if I can quote George Bernard Shaw, he said, progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. So if you stay fixed on your one idea, you may be driving straight towards a brick wall, and that's definitely got nothing to do with Brexit. I wasn't talking about Brexit at all. So I think it's always best to speak plainly and honestly about the situation you're in. Or as Matthew likes to put it, panic early. Right? Panic early. There are things that Cloudflare has done where he said we should worry about this. And I was like, that's not a problem right now. And he's like, panic early, like worry about it today, because it will build up and build up and build up and build up and build up, and then it'll be so big you'll have a problem. It's a bit like credit cards, right? You put a little bit on it, and then it's some huge debt. Long ago, I started a company in Silicon Valley with somebody else actually who's at Cloudflare right now, and it had the best code. I know engineers like to exaggerate, but it was really, really good. It was so good, we could have taught computer science from the code base. You could have come in and we could have told you all about it. But we had hardly any customers. And it was kind of great for a while, because we could just do whatever we wanted with the code. But actually, it turns out nobody buys your stuff, you run out of money. We didn't panic early, and we didn't face up to the fact that we were in a small market early enough. So that was a big mistake. Ironically, the CEO of that company, who's a professor at Stanford now, he used to tell people, get bad news out fast. Tell people things that are bad quickly. If you know something's going wrong, tell people quickly. And actually, it's a very good thing to do in companies. This customer's cancelling their account. We don't hide that. Tell people, right? This service is failing. Okay, well, let's go fix it. The longer you hold on to things, the worse they get. In life as well, actually. Cloudflare had a very, very serious security problem back in 2017, which some of you may have heard of. It became known as Cloud Bleed. We had, without knowing it, been just dumping the memory from our computers into web pages that people were visiting. So you'd go to a web page, and because of a certain sequence of the web page had to be corrupted in this way, and this thing had to happen, etc., etc., we would overrun the end of a buffer and just keep outputting memory until we either segfaulted or we dumped megabytes of memory. And that's not good, it turns out. That's a deep CTO insight right there. So the thing is, our machines are shared across millions of websites. So you'd go to a website with this problem, and at the bottom of the web page there'd be something else from some other random customer of ours. Something that might well have been encrypted and now was decrypted because it was in memory. That was just sort of pouring out through his requests. And this could be very sensitive information. It could be a credit card number, it could be a password, all sorts of things could have been in there. But that wasn't the bad part. The bad part was this is the web, and so search engines have been caching that information. Right? So Google had gone in and said, oh, that's great, I'll cache that. With all that private information in it. So anyone could go to Google or Bing or Baidu or whatever that thing is in South Korea whose name I've forgotten now. It turns out when you have to do the cleanup on this kind of things, there are a lot of search engines in the world. The worst thing was, because we dumped out memory, there were some certain keywords in there that were very Cloudflare specific, so you could type those into Google and all the pages that had this leaked information would turn up. So that wasn't good either. Luckily for us, Google's Project Zero, who does vulnerability research, found this. They were actually looking at Google's cache. I was like, what's that weird thing over there? Oh, that's Cloudflare dumping everything else. And they informed us. And the thing is, we were able to stop the leak extremely quickly. It took us about 45 minutes from P0 saying to us, you've got this problem. The whole team assembled. I was woken up in the middle of the night. because all problems happen when I'm asleep. That's a rule. And on a Friday night as well. And then we stopped the leak, but of course you have this incredible cleanup to do in search engines all over the world, and people could just go look for that stuff. And you've got to find all the search engines with caches, and you've got to somehow ask them to delete that data. And this is like the opposite of what search engines do, right? And literally none of the search engines had a mechanism for doing this. No one had a thing like, search your entire cache for something that looks like this and delete it. We got to people in Google, we got to Microsoft, we got to people in Yahoo, and Yahoo turned out to be just using someone else's search engine, so it didn't matter. And then you start going like, we spoke to the guys at Yandex, and Yandex were the best, the Russian search engine. They just said, what string do you want us to look for? We'll delete everything. And it was done in like 5 minutes. It was like, gone. Google was like, we've got to think about things. So we spent this time, right? So this mass deletion of data. In fact, even finding the people. Who do you ask of the search engine? Go contact@google.com, by the way, could you delete Google account? But one of the important things was from the very first night, actually immediately after I was woken up, I started keeping a record of what was going on. Because I knew we were going to have to do a public disclosure, and I wanted to remember, because I was going to forget all the things we tried and all this kind of stuff. And what happened was, when Project Zero decided that they wanted to go public with it, which was 6 days after they had found it, while we were still doing the cleanup, we had a big, massive blog post ready to go. We're like, bam, here's all the details on it. And we were able to talk about it. This was by far the most difficult week I've ever had. I mean, the bug was terrible. Right? It was private information. The cleanup was a nightmare. And then we had to tell people, right? We had to go off and tell people that we'd done this thing. And so throughout that first week, I barely slept. And I'm really not exaggerating. I literally sleep for like 2 hours, wake up and be like, oh, good. And then, and a lot of people across Glasgow, particularly in the US and the UK and elsewhere, were in constant contact. One thing I learned from this is you can actually keep a single Google Hangout up for a week. If you just leave it open. And we literally had 2 conference rooms with the Google Hangout on, and people would walk in and walk out at random times, right? As we were trying to deal with that. And so we kept it running. The hardest thing was that, particularly at the beginning of that week, I didn't, and certainly others in the organisation, we didn't know if Cloudflare would actually survive. We literally thought, we're going to go through this whole process, we're going to do this cleanup, we're going to disclose it, we're going to do everything right, but at the end of the day, maybe the company collapses. Because maybe we've leaked something so serious that this is just, we're dead. Which was a very strange world to live in, because you're living in this state where you're thinking, I have to do all this stuff, but we may not get there. And it really looked terrible, and we had 2 questions we wanted to answer. What private data has actually been leaked? Right? What has actually been leaked? What's in search engines? And then, of course, the second question came up, was, did anyone find this and actively exploit it? Right? Had someone else found this before Project Zero, and they were sitting there quietly, just sucking down data from Cloudflare? Now, a funny story about this is that I told Matthew that this was going to go to the press one night, and he was in Greece. And he said, don't worry about it. This is not a big story. It'll be in 3 publications, tech publications, and then it's going to blow over. Right? And I said, I don't think it's going to be like that. I think it's more, I told him, I think it's more serious than that. And then it became public, and the next morning, the headline in the Wall Street Journal, the headline in the Wall Street Journal on the business page, it was something like, internet company leaks private data for months. And that night, I mean, I talked to like the BBC and Reuters and CBC and every news organisation. I was on the phone all that night, talking about what would happen. And then we had to talk to our customers, right? So we were searching everything, and we talked to them on the phone. Some of those calls were hilarious. Some of them, people said, I don't even know why you called me. I don't care about this. I don't know anything secret on our website at all. Others, one thing that was very, very interesting was the more technical the customer was, the happier they were. So I spoke to one very major car ride hiring website. And I got on the phone with them, I started my spiel about this has happened, this is what we found, blah, blah, blah. And this person said, "No, it's going to stop you there. We've done our own analysis. We'll tell you what we think is the situation. You just confirm yes or no." So the more professional the organisation was, the more prepared they were. And ultimately, we didn't lose any customers. In fact, the only customer I remember losing was somebody who paid us $20 a month who just freaked the hell out. And they're like, "Okay, we'll refund your money and we're done." So we went off and looked for it, looked to see what had been exploited, and there was a tricky thing, right? Cloudflare has always had a very strong privacy stance. So guess what? We didn't have good logs going back that far. We couldn't just go back and go, "Oh, what's happened? Let's have a look." So we had to look at statistical data, crash reports we had to try and piece this stuff together. And because we really, really wanted to get the right answer, what I did was I split the team into two groups, and they weren't allowed to talk to each other. They were looking at separate systems. And I didn't want them to confirm a mistake the other one had made, and only Matthew and I knew what the other teams were seeing, and we sat at a table and did that. And then we published the second thing. And luckily, we didn't find evidence of exploitation. We found all sorts of weird anomalies on the internet, but we didn't find evidence of exploitation. And actually, it turned out that very little sensitive private information had actually been cached. We didn't find someone's password or things like that. So we got very, very lucky with something that could have been way, way worse. And so the funny thing is, as I look back on what became 2 weeks, right, there was a week where it was a secret and a week when it was public. I'm going to quote Charles Dickens, and I think I'll stop quoting people, but it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. Most of the company didn't know Cloud Bleed had happened. We kept the secret from most of the company for a week. And then the morning it became public, I got up very early. I was sitting in the shower thinking, I've got to go into work. I've got to go face the company. I took a cab into the office, which I wouldn't normally go and be there quickly. And the office was normally quiet in the morning, right? 3 in the morning. Almost the entire team was there at about 8. They'd all just turned up. And people were like, "What can we do? How can we help?" And it was really amazing, because I had not asked anybody, and they just kind of turned up. And so we got this big picture of Winston Churchill, because obviously we're in Britain. It's very important. It's a legal requirement. And he has this amazing quote, which is, "If you're going through hell, keep going." So we had this huge poster that said that, and everybody pitched in, calling customers, looking at certain changes, helping. And it was actually amazing. And I think although it was terrible, it really reinforced something in the culture of Cloudflare, which was openness. We were very open about what happened, and helping each other. And we were all in it together. And in the end we didn't lose any major customers. And in fact, I ended up being sent to visit a big potential customer in Germany who said, "We read your blog post." Well, not a customer, it was a customer, one of your competitors. "We read your blog post and we decided you put more in that blog post than this competitor has told us in 10 years. We want to switch to you because of openness." So it really matters a lot. The one other funny thing about that story is that the night it became public, and I knew it was going to become public, I was giving a talk in London called "Why Cybersecurity is Not So Hard." And I was literally giving the talk thinking, as soon as this talk's over, I'm getting in a cab, I'm going home, and a firestorm is going to hit. And the CEO was telling me, "Don't worry about it, 3 publications, they'll be fine." So Clapping was amazing. And then after that, lots of things changed, right? So one of the things was we made a big push to move away from memory unsafe languages. We'd already used Go quite a lot, but we did a lot more stuff with Rust, and generally pushing away from C and C++. And I asked that every crash on any machine is emailed to me personally. And that still is true today, and the team hates it. Because I'll turn around later, one machine crashes, and I'm like, "Why did that crash?" "Oh, I've seen that crash twice." And the problem is, I am a programmer, so I'm like, "No, don't try and pull the word over my eyes. That thing, go find it." So that was a terrible time, right? So that's a terrible time. Let's talk about a great time. We launched this thing called 1.1.1.1. I have 4 ones, right? A public DNS resolver. And the launch story about that is really about something else that I've really learned from Matthew. Being British, I think I tend to hold back a little bit, maybe. That's a stereotypical British thing to do, not put yourself forward. Matthew is very much, we should do stuff, be audacious, and audacious is the word. And Google had launched 8.8.8.8. Loads of people use 8.8.8. And really taken the market. They have about a quarter of the public resolving market. The address is easy to remember, 8.8.8.8, it's fast. And Matthew came along and he said, I have an email from him saying, we should get the address 1.1.1.1 and we should make a resolver that's faster than Google. Go and do it. And he's like, yeah, we can do it. And it's one of those things where sometimes I am there and I think, okay, we'll have to do it then. And I just know he's not going to stop me. I can't stop him. So because his view was if you get 1.1.1.1, that was more memorable, right? And 8.8.8 is better. And also we could do something privacy preserving. We don't log what's there, right? And then we hired KPMG to audit that we were telling the truth. And he said, oh, by the way, I'm going to launch it on April the 1st so that everyone thinks it's a joke. And also because of the American date system 4.1, it was all silly American jokes. And we did it. Now what's interesting about this is there's a couple of reasons why this worked out so well. Audacity is one of them, but in part it's because we had very good relationships established with different groups who run the internet around the world. We've done that a couple of ways. One is by being very consistent and open about how we operate, so people know they can approach us, we can talk to them about the problems. We're involved in things like the IETF and different groups around the world. But it's also part of the story about how diversity in organizations matter. If, in this case, age-related diversity. So if we had been the sort of company that said, hey, Zuckerberg said one time, like, people over 30 are stupid or something like that. If we had been that kind of organization, 1.1.1.1 would not have happened. The senior engineers, one of who is older than me, has long established relationships, long experience. It matters, and it matters in lots of ways. This is one way. It also matters in terms of having seen things before, you can quickly figure out, oh, this would be the solution to this kind of thing. So diversity in all its forms matters because you have different types of people, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on in this talk. But for 1.1.1, it was these older engineers who had this deep experience. So we were able to get the 1.1.1 address. It's actually shared with us. We have a contract where it's not ours, we have a contract where it's lent to us. And part of that's because we have said over the years that we're building a service for everyone on the internet, and we've put money where our mouth is, right? We have 165 locations around the world. This year, we will be within 10 milliseconds of everybody on the planet who uses the internet. So we're building out West Africa right now, more in South America, more in India, but everyone will be close to us. And I think then when you want to do something that involves an exchange, if you're behaving in a way that is fully good, you can get more back. So we're going to do that. And when you're everywhere, you instantly become the fastest. Right? I mean, we were the fastest day one, by far. So number one there. So it was, in a way, it's the architecture that did that, right? So it was easy for us to do it because we had built an architecture that made it possible for us to update software quickly and run it everywhere. Cloudflare runs a single stack of software on every machine globally. So we have, I can't tell you how many, a very large number of machines in 165 locations worldwide. Every single machine runs the same stack of software. That means if you add a machine, or you add a city, or add a country, you scale like that. There's no complexity. Which meant that when we rolled out the resolver to 1.1.1.1, it was like, bam, it's on every machine, it's available everywhere in the world. Suddenly we're the fastest. So the architecture has made a huge difference for us versus our competitors. And many of our competitors are not. That was largely put in place when I joined the company. Lee Holloway, who was the original architect of Cloudflare, working with a small team of people, built the service around a small set of open source components. So original Cloudflare, get ready to laugh, Postgres, Nginx, PHP. And that single stack of software was doing caching, CDN, WAF, DDoS, all that kind of stuff. It's all bound together by a distributed key value store that allows us to send configuration information anywhere in the world, typically in about 5 seconds. So if you make a change in our UI, it should be everywhere globally in 5 seconds. New Zealand is a bit of a nuisance because it's a bit far away, There are two options. You either change the speed of light or move New Zealand. Neither of them work very well, so we've put a lot of effort into the software that allows us to do that. But typically about 5 seconds around the world. So you imagine this architecture was put in place. Essentially, there's a large customer database in Postgres, and there was a ton of PHP to run the main website. And actually, when I joined, all of the core processing, when a request came into Cloudflare, was actually a PHP program. PHP FPM. I've got over the nightmares. Now, of course, we've constantly changed the software, but this architecture still exists. It's kind of like, it's kind of like one of those evolution things where you see the skeleton of a bat, and it kind of looks like a human skeleton. Well, the skeleton of Cloudflare is still kind of there. And funnily enough, early on in Cloudflare, just to show you what an idiot I am, I argued that there should be some special machines doing special tasks. So I wanted to build really cool, massive computers for DDoS mitigation, with like crazy NICs in them, and build my own operating system. And the truth is, I wanted to do that because it sounded cool. Really, I mean, that's the truth. I thought it'd be amazing and kind of exciting and cost a fortune and all this kind of stuff. Complex, low latency software. But Lee and Matthew were like, no, you're wrong. The simple architecture will scale. This thing won't scale. And some of our competitors have. They even talk about, we've got this massive machine that costs millions of dollars. And we're like, yeah, we've got a whole load of simple machines that didn't cost millions of dollars. And you know what? Matthew and Lee were right. Our network capacity is 25 terabits per second right now. We have scaled, we've handled the biggest DDoS attacks there are. Nobody's even noticed. Funny thing is, when GitHub went down last year under the big attack, and they were down for about 5 minutes while they switched over, one of the guys who works on DDoS mitigation, he pinged me and he was like, here's a cool graph, there's a big attack going on. I was like, what is it? I was like, oh, it's it was like, well, nobody went down on Cloudflare because of this architecture. So getting the architecture right, some sort of overall architecture matters. The underlying software you can change if the architecture is good, right? We've rewritten tons of stuff. We rolled it out overnight, fastest result everywhere. Now, of course, since Lee was working on that original software, lots of things have been changed. This guy actually wrote code. See, this is the computer science degree problem. All right, so he wrote some code in PHP. We have got rid of that. We started to throw away code that I wrote 6 or 7 years ago in Lua and Go. It's really natural. And honestly, if you're not looking back at code you wrote 5 years ago and feeling that there's something wrong with it, and it's no longer fit for purpose, you're either fooling yourself or you're working in an environment that's not growing and nothing's changing. Either way, those are bad things, and you should ask yourself. I am continuously embarrassed by my former self. The other thing that happens is about roughly every order of magnitude change in your service, your software needs to be rewritten or changed in some way. It's really sad that you can't start out building the ultimate code base you're going to need when you're really massive. But you can't. And the reality is, it's so hard to build software at all, just to build to build the service you're building today, that you have to do that. And you can't build the version that's 10 times bigger or 100 times bigger successfully. The other reason is that you don't know what tomorrow is. You don't know what the problems you're going to encounter as you scale up are. Some you can anticipate, but generally as your service grows, it becomes problematic. To give you an example of this, when I joined the company, our customers all had a very small number of DNS records, right? They were like an individual business or a user with their personal domain, and they might have had their domain and blog dot and www dot and mail dot, right? A small number of records. And Lee and the team had built a system that would scale up to millions of people like that. Right? Millions, it was great. You had millions of customers with a small number of DNS records, it would all work great. And it was fantastic. And we only had thousands at the time, that was great. And then along came a well-known blog hosting engine that had a single domain name and millions of subdomains. So it was the other axis, right? And the sales team took their money. And the sales team said, yeah, great, lots of money there, right? That was one of our first big deals. And we immediately fell over. But you couldn't change it, you couldn't update. Because the software was not built for that shape of problem. And it's finding the shape of the problem that you're going to have in the future that's really hard, and anticipating what it looks like. So because we had to immediately build a Band-Aid, and if anyone cares why it fell over, I can tell you horrible stories about inodes and awful things, why it did. But, you know, there are 10 stories like this where something's had to be ripped out and replaced. It's just normal behaviour. And you don't know what to expect up front. So you just have to keep going. If you're going through hell, keep going, right? But be ready to change quickly. This also drives another thing. We don't believe that any of our software, not a single line of code, provides a long-term advantage, right? So I could today just dump all of Cloudflare software on GitHub. And first of all, you'd laugh. And second of all, you know, you would point out some silly bits. But fundamentally, we don't believe it would hurt us long term. Because it's the changing and the process over time that matters, not the actual line of code. So why don't we just open source the whole thing? Well, we do open source a lot of code, but we try to be very thoughtful about it. Firstly, a lot of our code is very specific to Cloudflare, full of logic about how our service works, right? So it's not really generic. You couldn't really take that and be like, oh, that's useful, I'll use that in my service, because it's all linked together with how Cloudflare works. So it's not generic enough. So for example, open sourcing the code that actually runs our web front end, I mean, what would you do with it? Be like, great, I just stood up a thing that looks just like Cloudflare and depends on all these other Cloudflare things. Useless, right? But some other bits of our software are really, really generic. So there's a debate going on right now internally about a piece of software called Quicksilver that we wrote. So I mentioned before that Cloudflare used a distributed key value store to get that data out all over the world. We used to use a thing called Kyoto Tycoon, which was built on a thing called Kyoto Cabinet, and it was pretty cool. It worked great for a long time as we scaled up. But we ended up scaling out to it, where we got to the point where we were having difficulty. In particular, if a data center went offline and came back on and had to catch up with what had changed, you know, people are changing stuff on Cloudflare at a very, very high rate, right? Thousands of changes per second. So that key value store was just falling over, couldn't catch up. So there were operational problems, you know, once you've got hundreds of locations and all that kind of change. And it wasn't by default secure. The connections were plain text. So we added that, we open sourced that, you know, we push, when we can, we push out, you know, the things that are in there. But at some point, you know, you get to a point with open source software where you ask yourself, do I keep modifying this, or is my problem space interesting enough that I should rewrite it myself? Let's start again. We did that a long time ago with Power DNS. So we used Power DNS. That was the open source DNS server. And it was great. And then as we scaled, we ran into problems fitting it into how our system operates. Because we had particular logic around DNS. There'll be things to do with SSL and CNAME. There's all sorts of logic up there. So we kept modifying and adding things. And there was an amazing thing where there was a PHP program that called a C++ program that created some protocol buffers. We got read by another C++ program that did a thing in Power DNS. And at some point that thing is kind of like a rickety bridge, right? And you're like, this doesn't work anymore. And so eventually we decided to abandon Power DNS and write our own server. We wrote our own server in Go that is now actually runs the largest and fastest operated DNS on the planet. That's another piece of software we haven't open sourced. And the reason being then, once again, it's full of business logic, and in particular, full of business logic for handling China. China has some really weird things. There are two major telco networks in China, China Telecom and China Unicom. They don't talk to each other very much, and the connections between them are really quite terrible. And so you can find that, you know, if your bank is connected to China Unicom and you get China Telecom service at home, it might be really bad to actually get to that website, even though it's in the same country, maybe in the same city. So actually, within China, everyone connects to both networks, and they do all sorts of weird tricks to make that work. So we built all that logic into our DNS, but it's very Cloudflare specific. So back to Quicksilver. It's not got logic in it. It's based on LMDB, and has all this clever code to do data and code synchronization across our global network. Typically, if you click a button or you upload code, because of course Cloudflare allows you to run code anywhere in the world, Quicksilver pushes out in 5 seconds. It's pretty cool. The internal debate of why we haven't open sourced it yet is, do we have the capacity to nurture and handle the community? As soon as we push that out there, people are going to make pull requests, they're going to say, why did you do this? It's kind of like that. So if you're going to open source something, as a company, you have to decide, do we have the capacity to deal with it? And actually, you may have seen Matt, the guy who created Ruby, just the other day, he tweeted, "We are mere mortals." And he was saying, I'm just a human doing this thing. It's like, I only have so much capacity. And again, the creators of Kyoto Tycoon have largely abandoned it. So you have to be thoughtful. So perhaps it'll get open source this year. I would kind of like it to, but we have to do it thoughtfully. But in general, our rule for open sourcing things is this something others can use? And is this something we have time to maintain with the public? Of course, when we modify existing open source, we upstream it. We push out everything. Inevitably, there are some projects that they like to do it themselves and they don't want your patch. So we have to maintain forks for some things, but that's just life. While talking about intellectual property, it's worth talking about patents. Cloudflare has a lot of patents on software. It would be nice to live in a world where there are no software patents, which I feel is a bit like saying it'd be nice to live in a world where there are no nuclear weapons. It's very hard for one country to disarm unilaterally because of the power imbalance, right? It's very hard to not patent your software because someone else will patent it for you, and then they will use it against you. And so we took the decision to patent things for defensive reasons. We just don't want someone else to patent that thing. And we have a very large number of them. Speaking about patents, let's talk about governments. Lots of technology companies think they are too cool for school and don't need to talk to the government. They think, governments, technology moves really fast and governments are old and boring and what do lawmakers know anyway? Why should we deal with it? You see some of that playing out in the US with Facebook and other companies like this. That's really, really wrong. It's dead wrong to think like that. Yes, governments move slowly. Actually, you want governments to move slowly. If governments change major policies as fast as chat apps got launched, your daily life would be hell, right? Today it's a 10% tax, tomorrow it's a 50, and it's a 30. So you want government to move slowly, but if they didn't, it'd be a nightmare. But you can't ignore them. The reason you can't ignore the governments is the government is the one who has the army and the tanks. Right? So if it comes down to it, they could kill you. They probably won't, but just think about the power imbalance. They really do have power. And eventually lawmakers, they won't kill you, but they will make laws that affect you. Right? And it's laws are very hard things to change. And unless you've spent time explaining to lawmakers what it is that you do and what your business is, you might not like the law that's made. Cloudflare decided very early on, because of this guy and his law degree and all this crazy stuff, to engage very early on with lawmakers in the US and Europe. We did this primarily by just helping them to understand technology. Because what you'll find is that within the staff of a senator in the US or someone in the European Parliament, there are people who really, really want to actually understand, okay, look, what is going on? What is going on with networks like Cloudflare or ISPs or chat or whatever? They actually want to understand because they're going to eventually have to propose something. And they'd actually like their law to get accepted by business, not cause a problem. So one way you can do this is you can go ahead and explain to people what these technical arcane are because they want to know. And if there is any chance that your business ends up getting regulated as you grow, I would urge you to go and think about engaging early. Cloudflare has to think about copyright law, the fight against online extremism, privacy law. We have to because of the 13 million websites that are on us. And there are many things that apply to us. Lots of times people get mad at us and they don't like a particular customer on our network. Right? You see sometimes, Cloudflare is doing this terrible thing. And this is very tough because often, or maybe even mostly, we don't like those things either. There are things you're like, I don't like that either. But here's the tricky thing. You actually want a private company deciding, no, that can't be a line. And the answer is you don't. Many times the angry mob is like, that private company should stop doing this. And it's like, we actually have a system for that. That is politics and that is the judicial system. And that is why there are laws, and those things are done in public. Right? You vote, there are governments, judges make decisions, that is public. The last thing you want really is me sitting there going, I don't like that, I'm going to turn that off. We won't give that thing DDoS protection. So the transparency of democratic institutions is very, very important. And it's through those institutions that people express what they want, and then companies have to obey that. So if you have to do this, if you have to engage with governments, Every single government has committees, advisory bodies, industry connections, where they are dying for smart people from technology to come and tell them something. You know, politicians put on a silly tie and they go and stand in a place and say, this is the new Silicon Valley or whatever. They are begging you to help them. And so you can just go and ask, you'll be amazed at what people want to know. All right, I've talked for quite a long time, but I'm going to not shut up for a bit longer. So let me just talk about, so I've talked about some of the things that, you know, what it's like at Harvard. Let me talk a bit about people. So, you know, software is made by people. It seems really obvious, but people often miss that. They get so excited about the new framework and this language and stuff like that, and actually it's people, right? And sometimes individuals, but mostly by teams. Right? Occasionally we'll have that one engineer who does this one thing on the side, but even that one engineer tends to end up being a team that takes that over and whatever. I talked earlier about some of the, you know, our architecture, our culture of rewriting software, but it's people that makes all that work. And honestly, people can be an utter joy and a total pain, right? That's the reality of being a manager, right? People can be a real nuisance. You know, finding people, keeping people, nurturing them, listening to them, what they want to do, how they want to do things, is the single most important thing you can do in your company. That is what matters. That is what will make your company succeed. The technology, some smart idea, yeah, sure, you've got to have a market fit, you've got to have money, but the people, you can screw it up with people faster than anything else. So, you know, it's a bigger mistake to choose Perl over PHP or C over Rust. That's a small mistake. Choose the wrong people and you've got a big mistake. So that's the hardest thing. And finding people is really, really hard. First of all, the technology industry is booming, so engineers in particular have a lot of choice. You know, countries create special visas for engineers. Insane idea is that. Just imagine that, like, hey, you're a valuable person, come work in my company. Politicians create mini Silicon Valleys. Another thing that's hard is interviewing. You know, how do you find good people from an interview? I don't know the answer to that. I've been doing it for about 20-something years, and I'm not convinced that interviewing is not actually random, to some extent. I mean, I think I'm better than random, but not. I don't think it's perfection. Cloudflare puts people through an average of 8 interviews and a pair programming exercise. And pair programming is useful, but honestly, sometimes there are people who just do terribly in pair programming, and then you hire them and they do great. So, you know, it's so hard because people are different. And the idea that you can have this one thing and like figure out how to pick people is very, very hard. One thing that we look at is open source contributions, but then there are people who haven't contributed to open source. You know what? Maybe they've got a life outside of it, right? And they don't go home and do some cool project, right? If you say to somebody, what do you do outside work? And they say to you, you know, I go home and spend time with my kids. Well, that's pretty damn valid, right? It shouldn't be. Why are you doing that? You should be doing some cool thing on GitHub. So, you know, if you look at that, you know, if you made that your argument, it'd be like you'd exclude some group of people who don't want to do that at home, right? Some people sometimes we look at people's degrees. The degrees are always the last thing I look at. Be like, oh, what did they do? Right? It's more into what they've done in their career and who they are. And honestly, what they can do is often more important than what they have done, right? And actually, one of my old bosses used to say, don't hire people who've already done the job you're trying to hire for. Hire people who can learn to do it. And one of the reasons, it seems a bit silly, right? Because you think, well, obviously I should hire the person who knows how to program React. And it's like, well, the truth is React's going to be, I hate to break this to you, but React is not going to be hot for that much longer. And something else is going to come along, right? And so, you know, it's natural to want to hire like the same person over and over again, but it's not a good idea. Technology changes all the time. What you're really looking for is people who are curious. That is the number one thing we hire for in Cloudflare, is curiosity. In every department, actually. Because, you know, stuff's going to change. Our customers are going to change, the market's going to change, you know, technology's going to change. You've got to be curious about stuff. If you're not going to survive. And you don't find curiosity by looking at someone's degree. Right? You know, I went to a very famous university. There are people who work for me who did not go to university at all. I was the first person in my family who went to university, or finished it. You know, there are people who come from a crazy expensive school and gone to all that kind of thing. And sometimes those people are useless, sometimes they're great. You have to look at, are they curious, are they interested in what they're doing? And you really have to ask people like, what they like to do and how they think about it. What they enjoy and what they've done when no one is looking. What is that one thing they're like, that's the thing I love doing? I always ask people, like, just tell me something you just loved. And it can be anything, right? Another thing that's really important to ask is, can this person express themselves? It is very rare that it's okay to have someone who can't communicate with others. Sure, you sometimes come across that one genius who sits in the corner and only grunts, right? But their code they produce is amazing. But the real magic in companies happens in teams. Small teams, 3 to 12, something like that, people. You have to be able to communicate. Now, here again, communication is another thing that's very difficult. Some people are good at writing. Some people are good at standing up in front of a team and drawing on a whiteboard. Some people are good at, they'll draw a comic version of it. The important thing is you can't look for this cookie cutter. Everyone has to be good at this one thing. But can they express themselves in some way? And that's what making a team is really about. So trying to fit people together in such a way that they will work together. You are going to find that you've hired the wrong people. You're going to do it. There's no doubt. And built the wrong teams. And you have to be not afraid to move people around. Last year, at Cloudflare, 16% of people changed jobs. It's vital. Because you know what? Someone came in support, and we hired them as a support engineer because we thought they were good at support, and they turned out they were actually secretly on the side an engineer, and they really want to be in engineering. Or, you know what? Some engineer really wants to be in sales. And guess what? That's valuable. Let them do that. And actually, the 16% there is not just teams, literally change jobs, like change departments. You need to be, as a manager, you need to be constantly looking at your teams and asking how well are they performing? Are they doing well? It's not a failure to change a team or reorganize or move people out. In fact, it's a failure if you don't do that. If you think everything is static and everything's the same. Equally, you have to not be afraid to let people go. This is the thing that's really hard. It is extremely hard. But, there's someone you're going to think was great when you interviewed them, and it just doesn't work out. I've seen all sorts of things. I've seen people just stop working. Some people think they are so great they should be treated specially. They should get a big pay rise and a special office and all this kind of stuff. Sometimes people need to leave. This is by far the worst thing a manager has to do. By far. I mean, to this day, if I have to let someone go, I will think about it for so long beforehand, try and figure out any way I can keep the person in the company, find them a different job, get them coaching, and whatever the thing is to do it. And then when it comes down to it, almost have a heart attack. I'm sure my Apple Watch probably thinks I'm having a heart attack. Over the last few years at Cloudflare, I've been in a position of having to decide to remove 2 people who were in very senior management positions in engineering. It was very, very hard. You might really enjoy working with them, but it's not doing so well. They're not achieving what you expect from them. I know from my own experience, I've always taken too long to make those decisions. A boss of mine used to say, I've never fired anyone too quickly. I think anyone who cares about people, reflects on these things, wants to give people a second and a third chance, tries to figure something out. And honestly, every time I've done that, it's actually been a mistake. But ultimately, at some point you look back and you say, it wasn't going to work out no matter what I tried for that person. But if you do have to do this, if you have to let someone go, it is very important to be extremely clear and honest with that person and say, I don't believe you're the right person for this role. I've decided to hire somebody else into that role, for example. Do it clearly. The worst thing is to be vague about it because you can't quite bring yourself to say it. Right? It's hard. It's worth it, everybody. The other thing is, there's something I say to people who work for me regularly, which is, you need to tell me if the job you're doing isn't making you happy. Because I'm a terrible man. No, so I may not realise, right? I'm human. I may not realise this person is unhappy. And one day, not very long ago, about a year ago, one of the engineers who worked directly for me, there's a small team of engineers who work directly for me, he came to me and he said, I don't want to work for you anymore. Which was, maybe, I don't know whether he mulled over that, but he wanted to go do something else. He had a ton of experience, and he said, I want to go work on this other project. It's key that people have that opportunity to do that. A manager isn't successful because they hired a load of people, built this massive team. They're successful when the team builds awesome software, and that the people in the team are happy. So that's your goal as a manager. And that should be the goal, right? Help people do their best work, help them succeed. And then you'll look good as a manager. I'm almost at the end. I promise you can have Speck in there. Or you can ask me questions. There's a lot of discussion in the software industry about diversity and inclusion at the moment. Many years ago, I had a team which I still remember as the best team I ever managed. I was a fairly early manager. I mean, there were 5 of us. Alice, Tanvi, Roman, Dan, and me. So 2 women and 3 men. I won't tell you all the national backgrounds of them, but it was a total mixture of things. And it was one of the most fun teams I'd ever worked on. And looking back, it was because of the mixture of people and their different approaches to things. I remember very well having conversations with Alice about things where, her perspective on things was totally different to mine. And I was like, I hadn't thought about that. The same thing with Roman, who was this crazy, massive Russian guy. Who was like this big, crazy. It's that diversity makes a real difference. And there's tons of research now about diverse teams being stronger and happier and doing better work. And you'll really lose out if you don't have a diverse team. This is an area where Cloudflare is making an enormous effort, particularly in engineering, but over the company as well. Not because it's trendy or cool, but just because we know that the teams are happier and better and stronger, and the company will be. Some things we've done, we looked at the language we use in job descriptions. There's things that you say in a job description that I would think sound cool and might put off somebody else. We looked at how we interview people, what the panels look like, what we're looking for. One of the things we banned anybody from the company from saying this person is a cultural fit. Because no one knows what that means. That just means they're like you. Right? If you think someone's a cultural fit, you think, well, they're like me. Well, that's the last thing you want, is someone like you. You want someone to change things. And we looked at how we source candidates. It also meant reviewing our internal benefits and policies, because you might have somebody who really likes you, they interview well, and they look at your benefits and they're like, I can't do this, I've got some other constraint on my life, which is important to me. It's working, and I expect by the end of this year we'll talk publicly about exactly what we did and what the statistics were like. It's not easy, but it's working. Bottom line, there are great people from all sorts of backgrounds, and go find them. Okay, if you're still awake, I'm getting there. There's one final question that you might want to know the answer to. What is it I actually do? Right? Apart from write bugs for Tom to find for you.
The Cloud Bleed was your mark?
Did I write Cloud Bleed? Okay, I'll ask you that question at the end, and I'll answer it. I'm more than happy to tell you. The reality is that CTO means different things in different companies. But I can tell you what I do. Okay, firstly, let me drink some water. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, I didn't join Cloudflare as a CTO. My job title, and I still have the business card, says programmer. And for the first couple of years, I did just that. I wrote a thing called Railgun, which is a compression program that Cloudflare uses to speed up the connection between Cloudflare and servers. And once I'd done that, I went and wrote our web application file, our WAF. And then I worked on the DNS server and other parts of the stack. At some point, Lee Holloway, who was the technical founder, decided he didn't want to manage Cloudflare's stuff. They were growing big. And I had done some of this in the past. I had been VP of engineering in a company and other things. And Michelle Zatlin, one of Cloudflare's founders, who's the CEO, asked me if I would temporarily manage engineering. This is now officially the longest temporary job I've ever had. Initially a lot of what I did was just manage that little team, and then help interview people and try and grow things. And I was doing it from London, and everybody else was in San Francisco, so it was really weird. And there's one guy, Dane, who works at Cloudflare, who I think doesn't sleep. And he was the one who kept me connected, because when I was awake, he was still awake. And then he was awake when everyone else was awake. So somehow he's still alive. I don't know how that happened. Anyway, but I was still kind of writing code at this management point. But more and more what I did was I just encouraged other people to do things. Right? One day there was a very bright engineer who was working with me. I had worked with him on the DNS server. We worked on it together. And he came to me and he said, we literally sat in some big comfy chairs, and he's like, I think I can solve DDoS if you leave me alone to work on it. I've got this idea, but it's going to take me a few months. And he kind of sketched out the idea for me. And, it was one of those situations where, I'd worked with him, and I thought he was capable, and I thought, well, we should take a risk. And I literally sat there and I was like, okay, why don't you go do that, and I'll write all the code you were meant to write. So I took all the code, and I said, you just give me all the bugs you want to fix, give me everything and I'll write it. And that turned out to be a great decision because he built our entire DDoS mitigation system, which we're now very famous for, which is known internally as Gatebot, and which has dealt with some of the largest DDoSs out there. So I was just trying to encourage someone to do something. Of course, like everything else Cloudflare does, something built by an individual outgrows that individual and needs a team. Today, Gatebot and DDoS are managed by a team of engineers in London, and that original engineer is off doing something else. And so encouraging people is an important part of what I actually do. Slowly, my temporary job has got more and more things added to it. At one point, I was running IT, SRE, Tech Ops, the network, InfoSec, and engineering. Basically, anything that Matthew and Michelle didn't want to do, they gave to me to do. So it was a great temporary job. Slowly, I got rid of some of those things. I'm a terrible IT leader. Because what you want from an IT leader is somebody who helps people with their laptop and I'm like, fix it yourself. I know you're in sales, but I'm not going to show you how the printer works. So IT is now its own department with people who are much more empathic than I am with people with computers. The InfoSec, I was running the security group as well. That's now got its own leader. The challenge of managing a team split around the globe, I had staff in San Francisco, London, and Singapore, meant that I hired new leadership, and now I have about 250 people work in my team, but they're their own leaders. So what do I do now? I've obviously got rid of all this stuff. Along the way, I stopped writing code pretty much completely, and I did less and less management because the leaders were the leaders are the people I manage. But something else became really, really important. So my job has changed a lot. What became important was this kind of thing. Why did I say yes to coming to the middle of nowhere in Italy to talk to you lot? Because this actually matters, right? This is what matters, is talking to people. This is marketing, right? If you think about it, this is marketing. So doing this kind of thing, talking about Cloudflare, this is an unusual talk, because normally I'd give a technical talk or a product talk, but talking about this. And sales. I do a lot of sales. So Bob Metcalfe, the guy who invented Ethernet at Xerox PARC, has said, I didn't get rich by inventing Ethernet, I got rich by selling it. And this really important point, it's just not enough to have good technology. I started a company where we had the best technology. It went nowhere. You have to get people to hear about it. You have to go out and sell it. So, one way Cloudflare markets is through our blog. Lots of people read our blog and they say, this is a really great technical blog. It is. It's actually a marketing blog, right? It's technical stuff as marketing. We tell you technical stuff. And you think, Cloudflare seems cool. Well, that's marketing. So I used to write a lot of those blogs, and other people do now. And I go out places and I talk to people. But frequently what I do is talk directly to customers. So to give you an idea, on Monday afternoon and evening of this week, I was on 2 really long video conferences with potential customers in New York. Yesterday I was on a long call with IBM. We have a partnership with IBM. And this morning I went into the office in London and had a call with a client in Germany before I flew out over to here. So one thing the CTO does is sales. That is what the T stands for. One thing I'm not is the source of all technical wisdom in the company. I was once introduced by a law school friend of Matthew's as the brain behind Cloudflare, which is incredibly embarrassing. It's so far from the truth. There are many jobs in engineering Cloudflare that I am incapable of doing today without an enormous amount of learning. And teams are much stronger than individuals. Teams come up with great ideas, right? I do on occasion use experience. I do think that experience over years does sometimes help to push the company in a certain direction or to encourage something that I think is the right technology. A few examples of this, I pushed us to adopt Go when it was on version 0.98 because I was pretty sure that the concurrency in Go was going to be a big win for us in terms of our machines because we have many cores. And it happened that the reason I chose Go was because when I did my PhD, I did my PhD using a thing called CSP, which is the underlying mathematical framework something with Go. So I was like, yeah, you see, so I may be an old person, but there's something valuable I can tell you. I pushed us to adopt a project called ClickHouse from Yandex for our column-oriented database, and recently Rust. And with Rust, to tell you how one thing you can do is you can make pronouncements, right? Like, we're going to do everything in Rust, right? Actually, most people just ignore me if I say things like that. They're like, shut up. Because they've got a job to do. They're not going to suddenly listen to me. So what I did was I quietly went off and learned the language, and I wrote a little program and put it on GitHub. And then everyone's like, oh, I've got something in Rust. Oh, Rust must be cool. Okay, it's okay to use Rust at Cloudflare. Stuff like that. So you can give little nudges like that to people. All right, I have one paragraph, okay, that you can expect. So, if there's anything you can learn from my experience, which is, I came from a particular background, so I had a particular path into this, other people have different paths into the world, or from Cloudflare, it's be audacious. It really is worth us trying crazy stuff. We're going to get one. Share really widely. Share what you know. Be open. Yeah, you have to work hard. Spend a lot of time finding the right people. And Cloudflare does final interviews on every single person who is going to be hired. Those people speak to either me or Matthew or Michelle. Every single person is going to be hired. I do, on average, 7 of those a week. This morning I did one before I flew here, guy in Beijing. And I'll do more tomorrow when I go back to London. Finding people is really, really hard. Think about how you create teams. Think about how teams are working. That really matters. Rewrite your code. It's all rubbish. Anything you've written is rubbish. Panic early. Panic early. And above all this, try to remain humble. Right? Life comes at you fast. Stuff changes. Problems will arrive. You're going to need other people's help. Build something great, but be humble about your creation and change people. Thank you.
Whoa.
Well, I have never taught for that long without
Yeah, a single lifetime here?
Oh, I do have one more slide. You need to get my last slide. It's very important.
Cool, thanks for the extraordinary talk, I would say. You deserve another round of applause, but right after our Q&A session.
All right.
And I would invite on stage Michele.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yep. So, first of all, thanks for accepting my invitation on Twitter and coming here.
This is marketing. Do you know about Speck&Tech? It's an amazing event. It's going to fall on us.
Can we use it as a quote on our website?
Yes. That's very smart. Yeah.
Okay. So, let's see the questions from our audience.
Go on then.
First question, most has voted. Do you have any books to suggest?
Books that I like about what?
It
It says books in general.
It says books in general, but yeah. I think it's more.
Okay, so the last book I read was Lord of the Flies, which was great. It's got nothing to do, well, maybe it has something to do with technology, but it's mostly about technology. That was great, because I had a very bad upbringing, right? Because I was so into computers, I didn't read literature, right? All I read was computer magazines. So lately, I've been trying to read proper books. So I mentioned the book Give and Take by Adam Grant in the talk. I think that's a very, very interesting book. There's a book by a guy called Ben Horowitz in the US, which is called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is a story about creation of a startup and how difficult it was, and some of the things they went through. I've talked about some similar themes in this. That's really good. Andy Grove, who ran Intel for a long time, has a book about high performance management. I think it's called High Output Management, maybe. That's really great. That's an amazing book. Anyone who's managing should read. So probably those three.
Okay, lots of interesting ideas. Then we have a question about GDPR.
Yay, my favourite topic. Okay, let me tell you something before you ask the question. So in London we have this big customer event, and customers come, and then there are lunch tables, and on the lunch table there is a sticker, a big sort of sign that says what topic the table is going to discuss. So you want to discuss this, go here. I had the GDPR table.
So
Nobody ate with me. I literally sat on my own. There's a picture somewhere that says GDPR, and I'm like eating my own. So what is your GDPR
The
question?
question is, what changed, and as a US company, what's your approach towards the European policy?
So we had to spend a lot of time making sure we understood what GDPR was. There was a lot of confusion about it. So we ended up having a big GDPR committee which met for a long time. The big thing was understanding all the data we had about our customers, which, you know, it seems silly, but over time you add databases and systems and spreadsheets, and, you know, suddenly it's like, what do we know about, oh, this customer who signed up for us, well, it's in 5 systems. So we had to kind of label all that information. We hired somebody to be our data protection officer. And then what we did is we just said the easiest thing for us to do is to apply GDPR globally. It was like if you try and like figure out whether someone's European or not, I mean, what a nightmare. You might as well say, look, this is a reasonable privacy law, let's just do it. So, you know, if an American sends us a, what is it called, data access request, we'll answer it. Why the hell not?
That's a great approach, I think. Then we have a question about a topic that you have touched briefly during the presentation, which is how do you take decisions about, ethical decisions about what to host and what not to host, like about terrorism, stuff like that?
The answer is we don't look at what's on our network, and we don't ever have that discussion. The one time it's happened that something was thrown off of our network was the CEO decided to throw off a site called Daily Stormer, which is a white supremacist site in the US. And the people behind that, at some point in their forums, there was a claim made that the reason, you know, lots of other sites threw them off, right? Lots of other services threw them off, and there was a claim made that the reason Cloudflare hadn't done that was that secretly, the management of Cloudflare was a believer in what Daily Stormer believed in. And Matthew was just like, fuck it.
He proved them wrong.
He's just like, you know, there's this like, because it comes to a point where it's just like, and honestly, I think they, you know, they were kind of trolling and trying to see how far they could go, and they just made this claim that we were like secret. They literally said this secret management secretly supports us. And it's like, no. So no. Now what happens is that doesn't mean that, you know, you don't have to necessarily have a government order, right, saying this can't be on you. To be honest with you, if you look at the sites that are on Cloudflare, that doesn't happen. It's very, very rare. In fact, I think the answer is we've never taken down a site on a government order.
Ever.
Ever. Yes. At least in our transparency report, there's a canary which says we didn't, you know.
Okay, that's cool. What has changed the most within the team dynamics during these years?
Well, I mean, when you're 20 people, you can all sit in a room and agree on everything, right? And then when you're 900 people, I don't know who the 900 people are. You know, sometimes I see an HR ticket that says, this person is being off-boarded. I don't even recognize the name. That means someone joined and then left, and we're getting so large. So one of the hard things that's changed, I think, is you make a transition from being able to just chat with everybody, know each other, and have a personal relationship, to some kind of systems and function, like, how do I know who to route this to as a question to? You know, we have chat systems where you can ask who's responsible for something, because you don't know who's responsible for something, right? So that's tough, and it's kind of depressing, right? It's kind of nice to know everybody. Like, hey, you know, Wendy's in charge of that, Bill does that, Jane does this, and then you're like, oh.
So do you have whole company gatherings once in a while?
Yes, so Cloudflare does, we have a weekly meeting, which is, I'll tell you a story about this. We have a weekly meeting which is called the beer meeting. And the reason it's called the beer meeting is because there's no beer. So,
Like we have no Speck.
Well, no, you have Speck. So early on in Cloudflare's life, there were like 5 or 6 people, and they had a company meeting. Everyone would get together, like they get together on Friday, late on a Friday, and then they'd go out to a bar. And at some point, Matthew said, "We are not doing this. We are going to move this up until it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's no drinking. There's no going out." And he said, the reason is, this is great for us, the 5 of us who like this, But one day we're going to hire somebody, and this is how he always puts it, we're going to hire a single dad who has to go home and look after their child. And that person is going to feel excluded. So internally at Cloudflare, we changed the BEER meeting to the BEER meeting. It's an acronym. No one knows what it means. The idea is to reinforce this message that it's like, look, this is the company meeting, we do it on a Friday. Now actually we split it between London, Singapore, and San Francisco. But it happens during the day, you get to go home and do your thing. So we have that weekly. We have a quarterly meeting, we just did the year one last week, where the whole company gets together and we hear about what our plan is for the quarter. And then we have what we call the retreat, which is everybody goes to San Francisco, and we spend 2 days in a massive hotel. This year it was in Napa Valley, and we do a day which is dedicated to talking about Cloudflare. So we actually had everybody get together. So you imagine that time 700 people in a massive ballroom, working in groups. Everyone's been split up, so they're not in the same teams. They're working with people they've never met before, discussing what they like about Cloudflare, what they don't like about Cloudflare, what they would change, this kind of stuff. Putting all that information together, that's all gathered, and we talk about it afterwards. There are other structured kind of things like that. This year we rolled out YubiKeys for the whole company in one go. That was pretty amazing. Turns out if you have, we also had used some of the Google keys that use Bluetooth. Turns out if you turn on 700 Bluetooth devices in the same ballroom, Bluetooth falls over. So we did that, and then we had, in the afternoon of that day, we had a set of sort of learning sessions. We had some folks come from Harvard and from somewhere else to teach different topics, and you could choose. It could be dealing with difficult situations at work, dealing with the media. I did one which was on financial literacy, because I consider myself to be an idiot when it comes to the finance of the company. It's utterly fascinating. And I did lock picking. That was it. So we gave anybody who wanted to taught how to do lock picking. And then the next day we have physical activities with varying levels of what physical means. Early on in the company, because we were small, physical meant actually physical. So there was a thing where we had to climb up ropes on top of a high-up thing, and it scared the crap out of me, because you're on top of a really high-up thing. I discovered I don't like that. Now we can't do that. It wouldn't be very inclusive if we're like, everybody get on top of a... So we have a range of activities. This year I went hiking, other people went kayaking, some people went wine tasting because we were in Napa Valley. It's a nice event on the second day. So there you go. That's all of our meetings.
Okay. We have a question about what was the largest DDoS you mitigated?
I can't tell you. I think the public number is just under a terabit per second.
But that's not the whole
But
story.
I mean, it's regularly the case that a typical DDoS attack right now is about 0.7, 0.8 terabits per second. What normally happen.
Wow. Then there are 2 questions about, one about the hiring process and one about the gender gap and the percentage of hired women in your company. So I'm going, if you want to talk about hiring, maybe how you try to address the gender gap in hiring, if you do.
Well, I sort of talked about that a little bit
Yeah.
in the talk. So it's about sourcing, it's about the language we use in job descriptions, it's about the process of interviewing, and it's also about listening to people's feedback in the interview, after the interview, because one of the things that can happen is you can, depending on the, like for example, you might have an interview panel where there's one woman on the panel who says something about a particular interview candidate. You might want to listen twice to what they said, because they may be saying something that you're missing. Like I might miss when I interact with that person, and that has happened. Equally the other way around, the same thing can kind of happen. We're definitely experimenting with what works best for us. Our big focus is, when you're talking about women, is particularly women in leadership positions. So particularly managers, directors, stuff like that. Because right now, in the engineering organization, if I get the statistics right, I think there's 7 directors. I might have this wrong. I think there's 7 directors, one of which is a woman. The more we can improve that, the better.
Do you have any statistic about hiring in general?
But what our overall statistics are, I don't know. We'd have to get the HR folks. That's one of the things we want to do later in the year, is actually publish, like, this is what the trajectory was, this is what we did to actually go.
We're looking forward to that. How is your typical workday organized? Do you do you wish you had more space in your daily routine?
So, I have, so because in some ways the center of gravity of Cloudflare is somewhere between London and San Francisco, right? It's probably in Nevada somewhere, or something like that, right? So what happens is, I get up in London, and the US is asleep, and it's the best thing ever, right? I know that my boss is asleep, but actually sometimes he calls me, usually after a couple of glasses of wine, and that's usually I can deal with that. But they're all asleep. And so what happens is, I will go to the office, or I will go to just a coffee shop and hide, and I will go through all my email, and I know no one's going to bother me. And 9 o'clock in the morning, it's 1 a.m. in California. It's pretty safe to say, unless cloud bleed happens, in which case, God knows what's going on. But there was that period, and then I'll go into the office, and there'll be things happening, interviews, meetings with local people, people who are local. Most of the people who actually directly report to me are in the US. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, all hell lets loose, right? New York is awake, Austin is awake, San Francisco is just waking up. So if you looked at my calendar, if you talk to Natalie, who organizes my calendar, she's like, there's hardly anything. There's like loads of room in the morning. I think about things. Sometimes I might write a little bit of code, or the other day I was experimenting with some computer vision stuff, just because I wanted to make sure I was on top of it. In the afternoon, it's just like this big that goes until, every day until 6, but typically until about 8. So there's like this overlap period, which is very challenging. It's one of the challenges of being in an organization like ours. And sometimes, if I have to deal with Beijing, I'll be up very early because it's the other around the world.
Okay. Would you recommend to work in a multinational corporation or a startup when starting your career in IT?
Well, if you're starting your career, you can do whatever the hell you want. You can fail. I think there are. So after I left college, I ended up going to a startup without realizing it was a startup. I didn't know the terminology, right? It's 92. I didn't really think about it. I went to work for a small company in England, which grew very, very rapidly. So it was a startup. So my experience has been in companies that are between 0 and 2,500 people. And those are exciting companies because things change a lot. But they are not exciting for everybody. Some people hate that much change and that much variability. So I think it's worth you figuring out what feels good to you. Right? I have people I went to college with. One of my best friends who went to work for Lotus and now IBM, and he's just worked for them continuously, which to me is weird. Right? He's worked for one company basically his whole career. It works for him. So you've got to figure it out. I think, especially if you're young, of course, you can go to a startup, you can fall over, and you can learn lots and lots of things. That's great. So do whatever experimentation you can when you're young, because as you get older, it becomes harder to take those risks. But I don't think either one or the other is the perfect answer to that.
Okay. So I'm going to take the question.
No, but you asked me a question about Cloud Bleed.
Exactly.
Who wrote the bug in Cloud Bleed, right? Okay, so here's the super ironic thing about Cloud Bleed is we knew that the piece of software where the bug in Cloud Bleed was a horrible piece of software. We were in the process of rewriting it when that bug occurred. The person who actually introduced the bug had actually left the company. And when we published the blog post saying about it, there was a snippet of code in it. He emailed me, and he said, I think I wrote that bug. He's like, I remember that piece of code. Do you want me to come back and fix it?
Wow.
And I was like, no, you do not need to come back. It's just very nice of you, but it's okay. Do not feel bad about it. This stuff kind of happens. The worst thing is that bug only actually activated, if you like, because we were introducing a new component to replace it. And it turned out it changed the order of execution of something inside of Nginx, which allowed that bug to start leaking memory. So actually, it's a bit like if you have radiators in a house, never move radiators in a house because they leak. Because they've actually rusted in place, right? And software rusts in place. And if it's not leaking, it's because you haven't touched it, right? So we foolishly tried to move this thing and started leaking stuff out. The other message of Cloud Bleed is do not ignore your error logs, which are telling you something. Because when we went back in time, we looked at our error logs, it's like, wow, look at all those errors. And I was like, yeah, there's a lot of errors. Look, back in September, I was like, yeah, that was leaking people's private information onto the internet. So do not ignore your errors. So no, I didn't introduce that particular bug. But I'm sure I've introduced equally horrible things.
Okay, so if you want to touch very briefly about the impact of Brexit about the IT field for companies and startups. I don't know if it can be.
Did you say there was Speck and beer?
Let's go for the last question.
Let me answer that more seriously. So, the really hard thing about Brexit is not being in or being out of the European Union. It's not knowing. It's not knowing, right? So, it's funny actually, I think about 3 years ago, some folks from the UK government came to see me, because, you know, we're a tech company, so we're cool, and we're in London, so we got to come talk to you. And they said, what are the things we could do to help Cloudflare? And I said, not leave the EU, and not introduce draconian encryption, legislation. And they did both of those things. So I'm never asking for anything again. But the problem with the EU thing is, if we were in or out, and we knew, then we could plan. Right? And we could tell our staff, oh, we need to get you visas. And we'll do it, right? We're literally last night, after Theresa May lost the vote, we had already prepared an email to our staff saying, look, if she's lost, we want to reassure you that we will do everything we can. We will pay for the visas, whatever it takes. Wherever your passport is from, we will look after you. If you think about that, everyone who worked on that email was not doing something else valuable. Right? They were not doing something else to do with Cloudflare. They were spending money thinking about this damn Brexit thing. If it had become clear, we're in, we're out, it's this deal, it's that deal, we could do something. It's the uncertainty that is deadly. So, I can tell you what I personally think is the right solution, but it doesn't matter. You just need to know what the answer is. And the longer this goes on, the worse it is.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you one final question.
Go on then.
Tabs or spaces?
Well, so this has been hard, right? Because I've done a lot of programming in Go, which just decides. And then you may not know, or maybe you do, that I wrote a book about GNU-make, where tabs are significant. And, they're evil, that they're significant, right? And actually, this is one of the gripes I have with Python, which is Python said, you know what's the really bad feature of make, which is that make has significant white space? We'll do that. Right? We'll take that feature. That's one of these, every time I'm in Python, it's like, why did you take that one feature? Like braces were that bad. But
we have YAML as well.
I don't talk about YAML. Or JSON, to be honest with you, because that trailing comma thing, that thing gets me really angry. So I think I would personally prefer spaces. And I will just say, before you ask me the question, Emacs.
Okay, so I think we have some beers and some Speck waiting for you. Thank you again for being here.
Thanks very much. Thank you. I'm not going to do karaoke, all right?
A warm applause also to Michele, which is his first time as a first announcement. Yeah, sorry, I
I guess we have to say a couple of things before closing up. First of all, we didn't do a break, which means we didn't get donations over the break. And there's we paid him quite a lot.
Did you?
Yeah.
You paid him?
Really? We actually had to pay back the donations and actually the beers that you're gonna drink now. So we'd really appreciate if you can go there and get a donation over the next couple of hours that we're gonna drink the beers.
Really?
As long as there's beer.
And second point on my side, I think you said something, right, Julian?
Yeah, one thing, when I was there with you listening to John, I had this very emotional moment for myself. we started Speck&Tech just saying, hey, let's grab some beer, say to people we are at Speck&Tech, which is now a thing because we decided so, and let's tell people we can stop in Impact Hub and just hang out. And after 30 events, we are today with the CTO of Cloudflare, which was so unbelievable to me that I googled his name to check that he was actually the CTO of Cloudflare, because I was like, no way this is happening.
It's not a fake CTO.
It is probably some random guy on Twitter just replying to Michele, which is so cool. That he say, hey guys, this is I would like that. No, this
I actually made all this up, you know.
we agreed that we should this later.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is incredible. It's like one of the most random and incredible things that happened in my life ever. I'm super grateful to all of you and the people and companies and contributors that helped this happening. So thank you very much, everyone, and to you, John, as well. And
Even better, imagine on the other side John saying, where the fuck is Trento?
what is Speck?
I know what Speck is. Oh, you know what Speck was?
okay.
I kind of vaguely knew where Trento was. I was like, it's sort of that way. I knew where Innsbruck was, and I knew where Verona was, and I was like, it's in between. I kind of narrowed it down.
All right. Cool. Okay. Lights up. We really ask you. You're not turning off. No, we really ask you to please help us moving on the chairs.
All right. So enough with the sad/emotional moment. Feel free to hug me later, and Francesco as well. Just one thing, please help us stacking the chair. If it's a chair that you can close it. If it's a chair that can stack it.
We did something. We did something nice last time. Like all the chairs that are red, like this shape, please move them on this side of the room. The green one, please take them here. Here. And the orange and black over there, please then put them at the back of the room with Giovanni. Can you raise your hand? Yeah. The orange and black over there. Okay, thank you. In the meanwhile, we clean up the room and we bring some beers and food.